So if we have a look here at our patient Stephen Adams and we navigate to programs and start the village screening form, this is a screening form that's been developed for the Ministry of Health that will screen patients aged 18 and above, and it's incorporated two separate screening tools, one for those aged 18 to 39 and another for those aged 40 to 80. Now, in the interests of time, I'm going to race through this form and answer mostly just the mandatory questions. The Ministry have identified some major risk factors, and so some of these questions here are components of that screening form and make up the calculation of how many major risk factors a patient has. We can see that in the form that we can incorporate calculations and validation criteria, including making questions mandatory to minimize manual errors that are made when completing screening forms. So we can see this individual has 5 major risk factors using the 18 to 39-year-old risk screening tool. That puts Stephen Adams into a very high risk category using this tool, and we can also see that this individual has heart disease warning signs, stroke warning signs, a high average systolic blood pressure, and a high average diastolic blood pressure. So this person should be referred to the facility, so we'll click yes, and we'll refer him for the reasons that have been highlighted above. The result of that form is very high risk.
There are a couple more tools that we could show you with NCD screening in Tamanu. One of them is that you can use different screening tools and different risk calculations based on what's appropriate for your country. So if we look at this patient here, Roy Antonini, and we go and complete another program form for him. Now you can see that he's had previous screenings that we've done in this environment. So we're going to come into here to NCD primary screening and the cardiovascular disease primary screening form. In the demonstration that Tim just showed you, that uses a Samoan risk calculation where they look at the number of risk factors you have to determine your overall risk. But you can also use the WHO cardiovascular disease risk tables. And this one actually even works specific to the Pacific version of that table. So we can come in here. I won't fill in all of these other questions. They're similar to what Tim has already showed you, and of course they're completely customizable. But what you can do, what I will fill in is the systolic and diastolic readings. So let's say that they've got pretty high blood pressure, 2110. As you can see, again, it's working out the averages there for you. Going to skip everything else though. So the total cholesterol is pretty high. And here you see the WHO CVD risk charts. Now we're going to answer a series of questions in one form, and it's going to automatically calculate that risk for us. So it's telling us what the systolic average is, which is above 80, and also the total cholesterol was there. And so that individual's calculated 10-year cardiovascular disease risk level is more than 40%, which is purple. Okay, so we press complete, that submits, and you can see now when we come and look at Roy Antonini's forms, the top one there, the one I just filled in, is above 40% and is a very, very high risk for disease.
So if we now navigate to Tamanu desktop and we find our test patient Stephen Adams, and we enter his record, if we go to forms, we can see that the screening form that has been entered on Tamanu Mobile has synced across to Tamanu Desktop, and we can see that result of very high risk. If we click on that form, we can also see the responses that were entered. So we're going to check in Stephen Adams to our clinic today. And so he'll be presenting to general outpatients. So if we go inside that encounter that we've started at general outpatients, we can record some vitals for him. So we'll record a higher blood pressure, which is the same findings from the screening form. And so in that case, it may be relevant to diagnose Stephen with hypertension.
So one of the things that we want to show you, and this was actually originally designed for the Fiji prototype several years ago, was that program forms that you've just completed can also attach to referrals. Now, Tim's been demonstrating a workflow where you don't actually create a separate referral, that we're just adding people to the program registry based on the screening form that's been completed. But you can put into your workflow a separate referral, and this works across both desktop and mobile. So we saw before that for Harriet Connor, we completed a program form that says she's got a 10 to 20% risk of developing a cardiovascular disease. Now we might want to refer her to another health facility, and particularly if this has been a community-based screening or a screening down at the clinic level, you might want to refer the patient to a tertiary facility for further examination or for diagnosis or to commence treatment. So we come into referrals and we create a new referral. And in this case, we're going to go CBD primary screening referral. And again, you can answer questions related to that. Okay, and we can say I'm referring her from here, and I'm going to refer to another facility, wherever, Lilly Hospital, for example. And I can attach that form that we just filled in. I don't want to collect all those screening questions again. We've just done that. So all I do is select that form. I can do a diagnosis if I want. That's all optional fields. So I'm just going to click next and complete. And now that patient has a referral. And when I go into other facilities, I can see that referral. We can report on whether she's followed up on the referral. And I can click on there, come into here, and that relevant screening history is now attached to the referral. I can see those questions that I answered before, all in the one place, so that I'm not doing double data entry and all this sort of thing. Clinician that's arriving, a clinician that's sitting at Lilly Hospital can now see that they've been referred, why they've been referred, and see all of the data attached to that all in one place without having to click all around the screen.
So after we make this diagnosis, we should add Stephen to our program registry. And we do so by clicking the Add button, and we can see that some of these fields are automatically completed based on the user that's logged in and the registering facility. And based on the statuses that have been determined by the Ministry of Health, we know that Stephen's blood pressure is still too high, but he has presented to the facility recently, and so he's therefore actively managed. And for his related conditions, we've just diagnosed him with hypertension, and so we will add that as his related condition. After doing that, we can press submit, and we can see on the left-hand side that Stephen has been added to the Diabetes and Hypertension Registry, and that his current status is actively managed. If we click on that and we go to his registry homepage in his patient record, we can see all of the details that have been entered, and we can see below the screening form that was entered on Tamanu Mobile earlier. And that's because we can associate forms and programs with a registry to easily view a patient's journey within a program.
Now, as Tim just showed you, you can manually add people to a program registry and attach associated conditions, which is absolutely great, and that's a workflow that some countries are using. Your other options, you can automate adding people to the program registry based on the screening form that you've just completed. So if we look at this patient, Harriet Connor, who's 51, and we come in and fill in an NCD primary screening form for them. Now I'm just going to skip most of these questions. We'll do the current facility. We won't do any of these. I will show you that it can automatically calculate your BMI, and also use that BMI to calculate your BMI category. But as I said, we're going to skip most of these. I will do these. Let's say that average systolic blood pressure was there, and that's cholesterol. So they're a yellow risk, and we're going to submit that form. Okay, so see it's a 10 to 20% risk of developing a cardiovascular disease in the next 10 years. Just going to take this NHN, come out, look at someone else, go back in and find that patient. Okay, Harriet Connor, and you can see down here, she's just been automatically added to the NCD program registry. So that's an automated workflow, so that you don't have to add them to the program registry as a second step. And it's up to each country as to whether they want to automate that or have it as a manual step. So there's flexibility built into it like that.
If we navigate now to this Excel report which I generated earlier, we can see that this report has pulled out patients that have already been added to the registry, and on the left hand side we can see these patients' demographics and personal details, and on the right hand side we can see what related conditions they have, and then beyond that we can also see the date of their most recent visit and their blood pressure, both systolic and diastolic, and fasting and random blood sugar readings from that visit. And based on these readings, we've added some rules to the back end of this report, which we can then define the clinical status of these patients. So this will be a really useful tool for clinicians and users of the registry out at facilities, where we can easily see the key details that define a patient's status on the registry, and even add in some decision support to help make that process easier for them.
Now what Tim's just shown you there is our reporting tools in Excel, which can be really, really useful, and because they're completely customizable, you can produce these Excel reports with incredible levels of detail and aggregation and that sort of thing, as many columns as you like, containing all of the relevant data that might be necessary for really, really deep reporting. But if you want to manage patient cohorts, you might not want to export to Excel. That might be too much of a step. So one of the things you can do with program registries is look at those patient cohorts right here in Tamanu. So here you can see some of the different program registries that we've set up in this demo environment, and one of them is the NCD program registry. And here you can see things like the patient's name, their division and subdivision, their status, and their related condition. So I might only be interested in patients with a diagnosis of hypertension, so I can run that search and I can see that subset of patients right there. Or I might be interested in people with hypertension or diabetes mellitus type 1, so I can select both of those, search for them, and it expands it slightly. And I can also do it by division, subdivision, registering facility, sex, date of birth. All of those fields are available for me to search, as well as the most important one, status. So I might be interested only in those ones that where a review is needed. Okay, so they're the 5 patients where a review is needed. We haven't lost them to follow-up, and I'm going to go through and follow up with them now. And of course, you might also be interested in a particular village. If you're going to do outreach, I want to see every single patient on the NCD program registry from that village, and I can see that one patient there with their status and their related conditions all in one place. By clicking on that, that opens up that patient's dashboard. I can see previous forms completed for them. I can see their risk, related conditions and status here. So it's all in the one place, which is really handy.